Why the system never soliloquises every crisis you've lived through? They told you it was unexpected. Pandemic, inflation, war, you know what they all have in common? None of them collapsed the system, they strengthened it. Today, you're going to understand why the system never falls, and why you are designed to save it. By the end of this video, you're going to understand 3 things. First, why every crisis ends with more debt, more control, and less freedom. Second, who wins exactly when we all lose. And third, how your fear, your work, and your money are the 3 pillars holding this architecture together. This isn't theory. This is pure mechanics. And once you see it, you won't be able to unsee it. They sold you a lie. They told you the system is fragile, that banks can fail, that governments can fall, that money can disappear. False. The system cannot collapse, because the system is not a structure. It's a transfer mechanism. Think about it this way. When a bank fails, does the money disappear? No, it transfers. When there's a crisis, is wealth lost? No, it concentrates. When the state prints money, does everyone win? No, you pay with inflation. They buy cheap assets. Here's the trap. You think you're in the same boat, but they have lifeboats. And you're the ballast they throw overboard to stay afloat. Let me give you a concrete example. 2008, Lehman Brothers collapses. The headlines scream, financial apocalypse. What actually happened? Lehman dies, but Goldman Sachs survives. JP Morgan survives. Bank of America survives. Why? Because the Federal Reserve chose who lives and who dies. And here's what they don't tell you. When Lehman collapsed, where did their assets go? Barclays bought their core business for pennies. The wealth didn't disappear. It consolidated. And who paid for that consolidation? You did. $700 billion in bailouts. Your taxes. Your children's debt. But it gets worse. While you were losing your job, losing your house, Warren Buffett invested $5 billion in Goldman Sachs. Today, that investment is worth over $20 billion. Crisis for you. Opportunity for them. The system stands on 3 pillars. And you keep all 3 running without knowing it. Pillar 1, perpetual debt. Your mortgage. You think you're buying a house. You're not. You're buying 30 years of guaranteed payments to a bank. The average American pays more in interest than the actual price of the home. You buy a $300,000 house. You pay $600,000 over 30 years. Where does that extra $300,000 go? To the bank. For doing what? Lending you money they created out of thin air. Because here's what they don't teach you. Banks don't lend you money they have. They create it when you sign the loan. You deposit $1,000. The bank keeps $100. Lends out $9,000. It's called fractional reserve banking. You're paying interest on money that didn't exist until you asked for it. Asterisk student loans. You borrow $50,000, $100,000 for a degree that might get you a job that pays just enough to service that debt. You're 22 years old and you're already trapped. Credit cards. The average American has $6,000 in credit card debt at 18% interest. If you only pay the minimum, it takes 22 years to pay off. You'll pay over $9,000 in interest. They don't want you to pay it off. They want you to carry it forever, because a person in debt is a person in chains. Pillar 2, manage fear. Every 10 years, a crisis. Every crisis, an urgent solution. Every solution, more control. September 11th, 2001. Within weeks, the Patriot Act passes. 432 pages. Nobody reads it. Everyone votes for it. Mass surveillance without warrants. Indefinite detention without trial. Access to your emails, your calls, your bank records. Did that stop terrorism? 20 years later, we're still at war. The surveillance is still here. Your privacy is gone. Banks collapse. The solution? The Federal Reserve prints $4.5 trillion. Who gets it? Banks, corporations, hedge funds. You get austerity, layoffs, stagnant, wages, pandemic, lockdowns, business closures, digital health passports. Every crisis expands state power. Every expansion becomes permanent. The surveillance from 2001, still here. The bank interventions from 2008, still here. The tracking infrastructure from 2020, still being built, because a scared citizen accepts things a calm citizen would never tolerate. Pillar 3, asymmetric rescue. When you fail alone. When they fail, you rescue them. Millions lose their homes. Did the government bail them out? No, they bailed out the banks that foreclosed on them. Bank of America received $45 billion. Citigroup received $45 billion. AIG received $182 billion. How much did the average American who lost their home receive? Zero. Goldman Sachs paid $16 billion in bonuses in 2009, 1 year after the bailout. You pay for their bonuses, but it gets darker. Those same banks use bailout money to buy the foreclosed homes. Your home at auction. For 30 cents on the dollar. Then they rented it back to you. They crash the system. You lose everything. They get free money. They buy your assets cheap. Then they charge you rent. Pandemic. Small businesses close. Who survived? Amazon, Walmart, corporations. Amazon's revenue went up 38% in 2020. Jeff Bezos added $70 billion to his wealth. While you were locked down losing income, he was gaining $100 million per day. They privatized the profits. You socialize the losses. Now let's talk about names. Because this isn't abstract. The central banks, the Federal Reserve, created in 1913. You're told it's a government agency. It's not. It's a private consortium of banks. J.P. Morgan, Goldman Sachs, Citigroup. The same banks that get bailed out control the institution that bails them out. The Fed controls your money. They set interest rates. They print currency. They decide inflation. And you have zero input. You don't vote for them. Congress doesn't even audit them fully. When they print money, your salary loses power. When they raise rates, your debt becomes expensive. When there's a crisis, they decide who survives. The investment funds, BlackRock, Vanguard, State Street. Between the three, they control more than $20 trillion. The entire U.S. economy is $25 trillion. 3 companies control almost as much wealth as the entire United States economy. They own everything. BlackRock is the largest shareholder in Apple, Microsoft, Amazon, Google, Facebook, Pfizer. JPMorgan. Vanguard is the second largest. State Street is the third. They don't compete. They coordinate because they don't care who wins. They care that the game continues. BlackRock has software called Aladdin. It manages $21 trillion. One algorithm, controlling 1/3 of the world's financial assets. Who advises governments on financial policy? BlackRock. Who managed the Fed's pandemic asset purchases? BlackRock. They're the player, the referee, and the rulemaker. Who owns BlackRock? Vanguard is the largest shareholder. Who owns Vanguard? Nobody knows. They don't disclose their investors. The largest asset manager in the world is owned by a fund that won't tell you who owns it. The state. Many think the state is the problem or the solution. Both are wrong. The state is an intermediary. Its function isn't to protect you. It's to guarantee liquidity to the system. Iceland. 3 banks collapse. The government let them fail. Bondholders lost everything. Executives went to prison. Iceland recovered faster than any other country. The United States bailed out the banks. Executives kept their jobs. Nobody went to prison. Recovery took years. Why the difference? Iceland's government chose its citizens. The U.S. government chose its creditors. Governments serve the institutions that fund them. Campaign money comes from banks, corporations, billionaires. Law firms hired by corporations write the bills. Congress just votes on them. The state rescues banks, not people. Subsidizes corporations, not small businesses, because the state's job is to keep the machine running. And you're not the machine. You're the fuel. Now the part nobody explains. Crises don't destroy wealth. Crises redistribute wealth. Phase 1. Expansion. The Fed lowers interest rates to near zero. Money becomes cheap. The market booms. From 2009 to 2019, the stock market tripled. Who benefited? The top 10% own 89% of all stocks. The bottom 50% own essentially nothing. Phase 2, collapse. March 2020, the market crashes 35% in 3 weeks. Unemployment spikes to 15%. What does the average citizen do? Sells, withdraws, loses. What do institutions do? They buy. Because they have liquidity. Warren Buffett had $137 billion in cash. Berkshire Hathaway went shopping. You sell cheap out of fear. They buy cheap with information. Because they know Phase 3 is coming. Phase 3. Rescue. The Fed announces unlimited quantitative easing. Congress passes $6 trillion in relief. The market bottoms in March. By August, it's back to record highs. How? Unemployment is still high. Businesses are still closed because the market isn't the economy. The market is a wealth transfer mechanism. The Fed printed $4 trillion. That money went into the financial system. Stock soared. Meanwhile, 40 million Americans filed for unemployment. Blackstone bought rental properties during the crash. Thousands of homes. At discounted prices. Now those homes are worth 40% more. You lost your house in foreclosure. They bought it cheap. Now you pay them rent. This is the mechanism. Crisis, panic, transfer, recovery, consolidation. And it repeats every 10 years. Every single time. The same pattern, and here comes the uncomfortable part. You're not a passive victim. You're an active participant. Your work. The median American household makes $70,000 a year. After taxes, $50,000. Rent takes $15,000. Food, $6,000. Transportation, $5,000. Healthcare, $5,000. By the end of the year, you've saved almost nothing. Meanwhile, someone making $500,000, they save $200,000. The system is designed so the more you have, the easier it is to accumulate more. If you accumulate, you stop depending. If you stop depending, you stop obeying. Your consumption. Every transaction feeds the system. Mortgage, interest to the bank. Car, interest to the bank. Food, sales tax. Gas, excise tax. You're not a citizen. You're a revenue stream. Your silence. The system doesn't need you to love it. It only needs you not to question it. 3 tools. Distraction. Netflix. Social media. Video games. Infinite content. You're not relaxing. You're being pacified. Division. Left versus right. Vaccinated versus unvaccinated. Black versus white. While you fight each other, you're not looking up. Hopelessness. Nothing ever changes. All politicians are the same. This is learned helplessness. If you believe nothing can change, you won't try to change it. As long as you're distracted. Divided or hopeless, you're not a threat. You're functional. This isn't an isolated video. It's a piece of the puzzle. Why is debt never paid? Because it's designed to be perpetual. Why do wars always benefit the same people? Defense contractors and banks profit from conflict. They fund both sides. Why does every crisis end in more concentration of power? Because crisis is the mechanism of transfer. The Fed isn't neutral. Banks aren't intermediaries. Crises aren't accidents. Everything is connected. So why does the system never collapse? Because it's not designed to fall. It's designed to reorganize. Every crisis is an update. Every rescue is a consolidation. Every reform is an expansion. The system after 2008 was more centralized than before. Bigger banks. More government control. The system after 2020 is more centralized than before. More surveillance. More digital control. More corporate monopolies. Each crisis makes the system stronger. And you're not the beneficiary. You're the fuel. Your work generates liquidity. Your fear generates control. Your debt generates power. But here's the question nobody asks you. What happens when enough people understand the game? What happens when people stop rescuing the system? What happens when the fuel refuses to burn? The system doesn't need you to believe in it. It only needs you to participate.